We should leave
Broadcasting now.
Okay.
We're on. Good morning. Let's wait.
Excellent. So we've got people jumping in.
Good morning. Welcome to our Wednesday Future Capital Conversations call. We are honored and excited that you'll be joining us today. I'm going to be promoting everyone from attendee to panelists. And if you feel comfortable, we would love for you to share your screen as we expand our community this morning. We have three amazing guests joining us, Michael Anderson, Carol Carter, and Marc Barasch, who are on the screen already this morning. This is always one of my favorite parts when we get started, seeing everyone kind of dial in and join us. So thank you for joining us. Morning, Richard. Morning, Gil.
Hey, Gil. Nice to see you.
Feel free to unmute and say hi if you so wish. I'd love to hear your voices as you come in.
Rodolfo. Hello, Rodolfo.
Oh, Lawrence, congratulations.
Thank you, Gil. I appreciate it.
Hello, Mark.
Hey, Mark.
Morning, Mark.
Gil, you're my neighbor.
Yeah.
We should socially distance sometimes.
Good morning, Mr. Taylor.
Taylor, what's going on?
Good morning. Thank you for joining.
And Rodolfo, I see you there, and it's really nice to see your presence here. And Michael, nice to have you.
Hi, Rodolfo.
Hey, Michael.
Good morning, Dr. Dorsey.
Good morning, all. Good morning.
We'd love to see your video if you feel comfortable sharing. We're excited that you're joining us this morning. No pressure,
minutes.
though. No pressure, but everyone's sharing their video. I'm just saying.
Okay. about 10 minutes, and I'll get that together.
I am
Got it.
Heather, but I'm going to cloak myself in a few minutes and then come back.
Got it. I love the black background, too. It's just like just you and the screen. I love that.
Floating head.
Fantastic. What more do we need? Bill Taylor, I'm glad you're on the golf course, or whatever course you're on today. Welcome as we're welcoming new guests and joining. Just to let you know, morning, Rodolfo. We're promoting everyone from attendee to panelists. This way you kind of come into the community. If you feel comfortable, please feel free to share your screen. Not necessary to do so, but only if you feel comfortable. And we are excited. We have three dynamic guests. We're excited to share the good work you're doing in the world today. Let's wait a few more moments for everyone to join.
Rodolfo, it's nice to see you.
Likewise, Lawrence. Long time, though.
Yes, long time. Very
Yeah.
nice to see your face. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Good to see you too, Rodolfo.
Carol. But
How are you?
we met more recently, you know, than Lawrence.
Yes, and we're going to
So,
follow up with each
was
other
a
in the
couple-
next week or two.
A couple of weeks ago, I think.
That's right.
Morning, welcome Alejandro, welcome Robert, welcome to our Future Capital Conversations. You can see that you're being promoted from attendee to panelist. Yes, Alejandro, good morning.
Hi.
Hello, good morning. How are you? Great
Good to see you. Robert, so glad you made it.
Thank you. Great to see you all.
And as a reminder, you have the ability to show us your video or remain incognito, completely up to you. But it is
Hi,
wonderful
Hillary.
to see everyone
So
come
glad
in.
you made it.
Excellent. Good morning, everybody. And I know that we'll give it a couple more, maybe another minute or so, just to let people roll in. I'm just looking at my emails, and there was a fair amount of people that had conflicts this morning. The good news is, so everybody knows, we've been getting, a good amount of replays. So this will be recorded. So for the people who weren't able to attend live, they'll be able to view this later. So Heather, you want to kind of take us into a little bit of the overview and what we're going to be doing today?
Yeah, I'd love to. Thank you so much. So again, all of you, thank you for joining us. Like Lawrence said, this is being recorded. So feel free to share it or watch it later time or share with your community. We have an amazing program for today. We're going to be running 90 minutes. These calls happen the first Wednesday of every month, our future capital conversations. Today, we have three amazing guests. We have Marc Barasch, Michael Anderson, and Carol Carter. Questions, if you have questions or you think something's coming up, we're going to be filtering these questions in the Q&A section at the bottom. Please feel free to add the questions there. We're going to reserve comments, the comment section, for any kind of chatter or comments that you want to go back and forth or communication. So questions and answers, if you want to go ahead and put that in the Q&A, that would be wonderful. We're going to start off. I'm going to pass it to Lawrence, and we're going to start off with Marc Barasch and Patty Clower and Marc Barasch. Patty's going to introduce Marc. Patty, you're shaking your head. No, we're good? You laughing at me? That's okay.
No, I'm laughing at myself. I'm laughing
Okay.
at myself because I'm responding to Gil who wrote to me privately, but I responded to everyone about my schedule.
Okay. Well, this is Lawrence, you're on mute.
I know. Raise your hand if you've ever done that before.
Well, this is fantastic. So again, thank you for using the chat feature right away, Patty. So this is fantastic right away. This is private. So please feel free to use the chat feature, put in questions and answers, or questions in the questions and answer section. And we'll reserve about 20 minutes per presenter. So we'll flow from Marc, then we'll shift to Michael Anderson, and then we will shift to Carol Carter to help us close. And we're going to just really have a lot of fun. We want some involvement from you guys. We feel free. There's a couple features in Zoom, so a little bit of housekeeping to go through. In Zoom, on the upper right-hand corner, you should see in your screen gallery or speaker view. We're going to let everyone keep their pictures on when we're presenting. But if you choose to just see who's speaking on your screen, if you toggle through speaker view, gallery view, you'll see the different features. Gallery view has everyone up. That's what I have. Everyone's kind of like the Brady Bunch in front of me, or I can select speaker view and have just the person that's speaking. So why don't we, any questions before we kind of dive right in? I'll take silence as no questions. If you do have questions, please feel free to put it in the chat or the questions and answers. But for those of you, I'm going to pass it over to Lawrence. For those of you that do not know Lawrence, I think you all do, but Lawrence is the CEO and founder of Conscious Capital Wealth Management, the founder and chairman of Future Capital, and the author of Secrets of the Seasons. He's a fellow of the World Academy of Art and Science and a member of Nexus Global. He's had a long, estimable career as an entrepreneur, financial advisor, consultant, coach, author, speaker, and spiritual leader. I see you doing a timeout, and I'm done. That was it. That was my long-winded breath.
Thank you.
Lawrence, I'll pass it right over.
Thank you, Heather. And thank you, everybody, for showing up. I'm looking at our numbers right now, and it's a small group because I think everybody is so busy and have so much going on in their lives right now. We keep, hello, Carol, nice to see you. It keeps building a little bit. So I'm glad we haven't gotten into the meat yet. But I think one of the wonderful things about us being maybe 25 or 30 people today there'll be a lot more ability for us to interact. Sometimes when we have the 100 or 200, it gets a little bit crazy. So I think that this will be really nice. And as we stated before, this will be really recorded as well, so people can hear it afterwards and it'll be posted up. Nice to see everybody rolling in now. Perfect.
Feel free to start your video for those that have been promoted to panelists. Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah, please do.
If you feel comfortable.
Excellent. So I will be brief so we can get into the meat of it. We actually have an inside joke whenever I say, I'll be brief, people roll their eyes, but I will really do my best to do that this time. Steve, I see you laughing extra hard. So what I'd like to say is really just ground us in what this is. We all know, if you don't, Future Capital was born out of this conversation and this concept of that the two most powerful things that our species possess is our consciousness, which can be translated into many different words, but let's just say everything that becomes a thought in us and that is moved out into the world, into action, and this thing called capital, which I think most of us would say that it is clearly one of the most powerful tools ever created by man and women. And so putting those two together is how we can get to a place of sustainability and transformation at a level that we really need to in today's world today, especially in the world of capital, where it has been driven so much unconsciously, which has created so much problems for our world. What this meeting is all about is about, and I would rather just do this as a vision, because there's so many words that get shared in today's world. Let's just look at a vision of future capital is like a garden. And what we are doing is we are creating a safe space where people can come who align with the nexus of future of the consciousness and capital coming together to heal that connective tissue, really resonate with this. And on an individual or bilateral or collective mission, we are doing that work out there in the world. So this very simply is bringing people together who are doing this type of work out in the world and showcasing that so they can become working groups and or supported bilaterally by this amazing community that we're part of. I am going to read something briefly, which is unlike me because I usually just speak, but I'm going to read something briefly, and then I'm going to suggest we all go into a moment of silence, and then I will hand this over to Patty. But before I do that, I want to just call out our design executive team. We don't really have a name for ourselves. It doesn't much matter. But the people who are working seems like every day of the week to some degree on Future Capital and have been from the beginning. Patty Clower, Steve Sheath, and Heather Desjardins. Great team. And we've been hammering it out behind the scenes. And I really appreciate all your work and commitment to this. Even if, as we have fallen asleep, even as we have abused nature, our planet, and our very ground of being, even as the global pandemic is upon us, a deep inherent ecological connection with the earth and each other has spoken to many of us. As we become aware, as we are in effect forced to wake up and listen, we experience a kind of wisdom that is different from the matter-of-fact knowledge about how to do things. This is the received wisdom that has been demonstrated to us throughout our lives. Unfortunately, our powerful minds and our willingness to accept the atrocities we now see everywhere have collectively brought us to a dangerous place. Our minds are predisposed to a kind of self-worship, a mental narcissism pervading the realms of politics and power, which in turn leads to aggressive thoughtlessness, destructive behavior in nearly every realm of human behavior. We find ourselves consumed with taking sides, with using our personal stories, our dreams, to fight against each other, nation against nation, Democrats versus Republicans, socialists versus capitalists, black against white, my religion versus your religion, and on it goes. What we are missing is the awareness of the gift of this third season we are in right now, beckoning us to wake up from our slumber, reminding us that we are all one and are all called to come together to redirect the trajectory of our species while there is still time. During this time of waking, we begin to heal the connective tissue between consciousness and capital, and our species' two most powerful tools. So if we all take a couple deep breaths and just come present with each other in this moment that we're here, these absolutely beautiful people who have joined us today as part of this community. And just come with the intention that we're all here to support each other with our work and our reason for being here at this critical time in this world. Patty, over to you when you're ready.
Thank you. So I'm going to introduce Marc Barasch, and I think at this point we're all going to stop our videos and mute ourselves. Is that correct, Heather?
No, just mute, Patty.
Yeah, just mute.
Leave the
and then,
videos on.
Okay.
Yeah,
Leave the
we thought
videos
we could
on.
leave the videos on, but just as a reminder, you have that feature. So I have you all on speaker view, meaning I have, excuse me, on gallery, I see everyone, but you can turn on speaker view, so only the speaker will present on your screen.
Okay, great. So I'd like to introduce Marc Barasch. He is a dear friend and an extraordinary person. So Marc is an author. He wrote a best-selling book on the practice of kindness called Field Notes on a Compassionate Life. Once he finished that, he turned his attention to the earth and offering kindness to our planet, and founded the Green World Campaign to promote reforestation and agroecology in the developing world. After regenerative projects in half a dozen countries, the Green World Campaign established an award-winning program in coastal Kenya that offers, over the past decade, has planted 4 million biodiverse trees and provided eco-education for 20,000 students a year, training thousands of farmers in permaculture, incubated community enterprises, operated women's clinics, and preserved sacred forests. So Marc has currently assembled a Moringa moonshot, which I suspect he'll talk to you about. And I guess what I would like to say is, if life were a work of art, then Marc's life would be a masterpiece. And look him up on Wikipedia, because there's too many things to say about him. And but in my opinion, his greatest accomplishment is the quality of his heart and how he touches the lives of everyone he meets. I give you my dear friend Marc, and the master of synchronicity.
Thank you, Patty. So I'm very happy to be here today because it's the kind of group it is, and we talk a lot about consciousness and intersection of consciousness and everything we're doing. I'm going to give this as kind of a narrative and a very brisk PowerPoint, just to try to give you let you into this universe that I've been in for the last 15 years. And as Patty said, very much driven by sort of synchronicity and asking what the universe wants. So it's been an unusual methodology where literally it's sort of self-assembled and self-emerged, even though it may look quite organized. That's the secret story behind it. So I'll be telling that story as well as an exposition of what I've actually been doing. So I'm going to see if I can do a successful screen share here. Hopefully that will work. Is it? Yes?
Yes.
It is, Marc, yes.
All right. So the journey began, I was an author and a filmmaker and media guy, media activist for most of my life. And then I wrote a kind of a fourth book after writing a bunch of books on healing and dreams on compassion. And that turned out to be much more pivotal than I thought. I'd been sitting in a room writing books for 15 years pretty much. And this book affected me very deeply and made me want to basically not write books anymore. And when I went out on a book tour, people were asking me, how can I join this compassion movement, which I completely drew a blank on. I mean, I said, there is no movement, but I'll try to see if I can make something, put something together that we could all do that would express this ethos of compassion. When I had completed the book tour, there were big events. Literally, I left the last talk that I was giving in Seattle for my mother's deathbed. I flew just in time to say goodbye to her. A month later, I had what the French call a coup de foudre, and fell in love at first sight and was in this state of love of my life kind of experience that turned out to be a 15-year relationship. from a chance meeting at a bookstore. So a lot was going on. And at one point, my then new girlfriend said, I don't understand what you do for a living, because I didn't seem to be doing anything. I was in this interregnum where normally I would go write another book. And I said, I don't really know what I'm going to do next. I'm just going to sort of ask this question of what does the universe want? And literally just see what comes up. And I really had no idea. So a lot of things grew out of the book. This is the Compassionate Cities movement that grew out of a lecture that I given in Seattle about posing the thought experiment, what would it mean if the central organizing principle of civic life were compassion? And that grew into this movement that's really run by the International Campaign for Compassionate Cities, Compassion Charter, the author Karen Armstrong, that's in 400 cities now. Then a filmmaker named Tom Shadyac wanted to do a film that was deriving from this work, a film on compassion. That film came out and it was on Oprah and it sort of got the message out. But I wasn't really wanting to deliver messages anymore. I wanted to actually do something that I could know would affect people in a very tangible way, that would feed people or do something that would actually help. I got tired of talking about it. I wanted to walk my talk. And it happened that Tom Shadyac, who did Bruce Almighty and a bunch of Ace Ventura Pet Detectives, a bunch of other things, was in a mode where he wanted to give away everything he owned. And was in his own transition. So he literally wrote me a check for $100,000 out of the blue. It's kind of an option for the work, but really it was just a gift. And I decided to use that gift to start something that turned into the Green World Campaign. Although I didn't really know what that was, but I knew after having met somebody, again, by chance, that was doing something called agroforestry, which means planting trees and crops and herbs all together, the most ancient form of agriculture. He'd been doing this for his entire life, pretty much. I'd never heard of it. And I thought, well, this answers this idea of how do you manifest compassion, because it helps people, it helps the planet, feeds people, helps biodiversity. It really was kind of an everything strategy. And I was very taken with it. And I just decided I'm going to do something called Green Compassion. I had no idea what that was at the time, but I made up this very simple name, which was kind of a Potemkin village that didn't really exist. And I was invited to go to Ethiopia by an organization there, and flown there on Ethiopian Airlines, and wound up in the Garagi zone of Ethiopia, where I learned about what they were doing in terms of this regenerative strategy of agroforestry. And what they were doing was a project that was the first project that we financed, which I called Bees and Trees. And it basically shows how this idea works, that they would plant grevillea and coleandra trees, which have these beautiful red blossoms that attract pollinators to these traditional honey hives. So that increases the honey harvest, and it pollinates a lot of wild herbs and plants. And so it was a whole system approach. It was what the poet Wendell Berry calls solving for pattern. So it was increasing income, it was increasing environmental biodiversity, it was regenerating landscapes that were degraded. Ethiopia had, I think at that time, 2%, 3% tree cover, completely degraded land, and they were bringing that back. And I thought this is a model that perhaps could iterate in different environments in its own way. So I thought this was something I'm going to try to apply this idea of green compassion to degraded land areas, which constitute about, the degraded land areas that are capable of being regenerated are about 5 billion acres. And I thought this could be a solution for a lot of global problems, including climate change, because of trees absorbing carbon and soil absorbing carbon. And it really is possible to take degraded land and turn it green again, which is an amazing thing. So I sort of learned by doing, and piloted or joined different programs as Green World Campaign in Ethiopia, Mexico, India, Jordan, Philippines. Eventually, I think it was 10 countries altogether before we landed in Kenya. And Kenya is where the whole thing got traction. And it was a small group of people. This is a project that was a degraded watershed in Kenya called the Pungu watershed. This was a movement that we started called Trees for Peace that unexpectedly spread through youth groups and Green World schools, which I'll get to in a bit, that were all, again, being created or self-created. People would come up with ideas. I would simply recognize the value of it. I would try to see what the needs were, try to put ourselves at service. We've done this and we're doing it and continue almost pro bono. So there was no, we're not dining off our clients, as it were. I didn't want to do a traditional charity. I didn't want a big office. I'm still working out of a spare bedroom. You know, I wanted to see what a few people could do if they really tried to practice compassion and thought about other people and about the environment and enacted that their hearts. I mean, it sounds naive and simple, but everything I'm going to describe has grown out of that. So these were just some kids that said, we want to be part of this. And I was able to finance a whole program in the Pungu watershed with Disney. And it just, again, came up that Disney had a little money to get rid of, and somebody knew somebody at Disney. And we planted 250,000 trees there and put together 450 members of the community. And the Green World began to get noticed in Kenya and won a National Forestry Award. These are the kind of core group. The fellow on the lower right of this photo tragically died, and he died defending one of the Green World community gardens from marauders. That's how these people who are really barely getting paid for this, they're all idealists, have gotten so deeply into this project and kind of alternate society, if you will, in an incredibly difficult environment in coastal Kenya. I won't read this whole quote at the bottom. But
hey, Mark, excuse me, but we only see the front page, the Compassionate Life cover.
Oh, you're kidding. Oh, that's terrible. I'm way, way ahead in all these other images. Now, is the screen not being shared, right? I guess not.
It's shared, but
how about, it might have to be this way. How about now?
Yes.
Are you seeing the other pages?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all good now. Perfect.
I'm sorry. Okay. Well, I'm going to very quickly, this is what you missed. That's the bees and trees. This is the idea of how land can regenerate. These are the countries we worked in. Sorry to backtrack, but this is where the whole thing started, Green World. Very small group of people. This is the barren area I was describing. These are water tanks that we supplied for the water supply. And this is the group that I was describing to you. So the idea is that we are just working on empathy, generosity, and trust. We're not trying to take over. We're not trying to use this to feather our own nests. It's kind of an unusual approach, not an easy one, by the way. It's a biocultural approach. That here's an example of youth helping elders to restore sacred forests that are also biodiversity hotspots. Because you couldn't cut down trees and you couldn't hunt animals and you couldn't use the herbs except in a sacred way. So these areas were preserved, not only as sacred spots, but as areas where the original biodiversity still thrived. We had somebody who was very interested in currency as part of our group. And I said, well, can we start an alternative currency? So we started a complementary currency that had remarkable effects, because in a poor country where there are no, in this case, shillings, if you introduce a collaborative community currency, it triggers a lot of economic activity because people have a medium of exchange. So we saw that trust went up, gifting, environmental activity, crime and corruption decreased. It was an extraordinary intervention, and it spread all around coastal Kenya. We also were able to help start businesses, small businesses that grew out of this. This is a coconut business, coconut oil, and it prevents people from cutting down their coconut trees for firewood or for sale, because now there's value. They can sell this coconut oil, which has become very popular. We've done media. this was a crazy story I don't have time to tell, but I was somehow enabled to take over a dozen screens on Times Square on Earth Day, huge, immense screens, and do a text to give project that enabled people to plant 5 trees in Kenya on their cell phone, and won a bunch of design awards, went all over the world, and kind of spread the word. So I'm very intent also on movement building and how do we spread this idea of green compassion and regeneration, which is really the shorthand for what we're doing, regeneration and community regeneration of the planet. One of the real crown jewels of this project is Green World Schools, which now comprise 20,000 students a year, where children are taught all of these principles and also grow trees, often fruit trees that give them nutrition, or vegetables, seedbed nurseries. And each school will take care of typically 2,000 trees, and the kids will do it during their careers. And one tree that I introduced that I had encountered in Ethiopia was the moringa tree, which is a superfood tree that has remarkable vitamin, mineral, and protein content, and I think can change the world, as you'll see. So the kids from the school taught their parents about the moringa tree. And then all of a sudden, there were these community projects on moringa. It took over, in a way, it didn't take over, it became part of these forest gardens or agroforestry or agroecology plots. But it became very useful to the communities, both for nutrition and for oil, so that they could press the seeds for oil, and that would save 20% of family income that's usually spent on oil, with a lot of other potential economic benefits. So the slogan of the Green World campaign was, "It's amazing what one seed can grow." That's really how all of this has come into being. And eventually we realized we should look at this also as a social venture. So I started something called Green World Ventures. We began in Nigeria with a project that has not fully come to fruition, unfortunately, because of political situations there, but it attracted the former COO of Kraft Foods and aggregated co-ops representing 100,000 farmers to begin to grow moringa. We hope to revisit that. What was the extraordinary thing about this Imo State area of Nigeria is they're still doing traditional biodiverse perennial agriculture or permaculture. This is a kind of typical, it's a sketch of a garden, and you'll see there, actually they have probably 26 species that they grow together, moringa being one. But this is the methodology of agriculture that a lot of people, obviously not just me, believe could really change the world, to go beyond traditional, what's become traditional agriculture, conventional agriculture that degrades soil, destroys biodiversity, and produces nutrient-poor food, and is not economically very good for most people on the planet that are doing this farming, because it's so centralized. And we also there created a project that involved fortifying the everyday cereal that people eat, which is made of cassava, which is essentially non-nutritive, with African indigenous vegetables and moringa. That's a project that we think has enormous, enormous potential to drive the planting of moringa and the processing of moringa and other traditional indigenous vegetables, which then regenerate land, but also provide income for farmers, much more than the economies that they have now. So we have started something called the Moringa Moonshot. It's now a multi-institutional effort to unlock the secrets of this incredible tree, and to begin to really unlock the value for people and planet. This involves Rutgers University, UC Davis, Hebrew University of Jerusalem, Texas A&M Prairie Wood, and several African universities. Because the tree is drought tolerant and it can be harvested in just 3 months. It grows very fast, and it grows on degraded land, and the leaves are 30% protein with all amino acids. So we believe it can lead to value chains that drive regeneration. And regeneration is desperately needed for all the reasons I've mentioned above. And one in particular is drawing down carbon, because degraded land outgasses greenhouse gases. And of course, healthy land and healthy soil absorbs carbon dioxide. There's a lot of debate over how much, but I'm in the camp that a lot, especially if we looked at this as a way to
Mark,
scale. Yes.
Sorry to interrupt, but, and this is such an intriguing slide to land on, but I just wanted to say that we have only a few minutes left. And I wanted to give other people an opportunity to ask questions.
Absolutely. So I'll just say that this slide shows that it's the program we're focusing on now in Kenya, that moringa, we discovered, can also mitigate some of the comorbidity factors in COVID. So all of the things that I described can be done along with mitigating the COVID pandemic in Kenya and elsewhere. So overall, we have started a Regenerative Kenya project, and we're iterating that with the government. It's a lot more I could tell, but I'll stop here.
So I wanted to ask if anyone wants to ask Mark a question, feel free to speak up, because I noticed that the Q&A, it's hard to, I guess there's a problem writing in questions on the Q&A. So if anyone has a question for Mark about this, feel free to speak up right now.
I have a comment. That picture is amazing, by the way, Mark.
Oh, thank you. This is the collaboratory, by the way, for the Moringa Moonshot.
Hey, Mark, I'd like to know more, I suspect others would too, about moringa and COVID. What have you guys learned? What's
so it's COVID cytokine storms or inflammation is one of the really deadly aspects, maybe the main aspect. We're learning about the disease as we go. One of our team members from UC Davis has a patent on moringa as an anti-inflammatory, which they license to L'Oreal, but has a lot of, for cosmetics, so it has obviously a lot of other implications. So the anti-inflammatory activity is very well proven for moringa leaf. It has anti-asthmatic activities. It's hepatoprotective in terms of liver and other organ damage. It's a glucose regulator, also very well proven. So when you have diabetes and obesity as comorbidity factors, then moringa is able to mitigate that. There's evidence of antiviral activity and just the general nutrient density of the plant, which is maybe the most nutrient dense plant on the planet. Obviously has incredible implications for just general nutrition, but it also boosts immunity. We think there are a lot more discoveries to make, by the way, about moringa. So a lot of what we're hoping to do, and the hardest dollar to finance, is R&D. We have some of the best research labs and most knowledgeable scientists who have made a specialty of moringa aggregated under this Moringa Moonshot umbrella. And we think we could really change the world if we found more things that made moringa an economically viable plant and not just something to throw into your smoothie.
Hey, Mark, could you just mention really quickly the resiliency? Because I've been blown away about that when you've told me about the moringa.
Oh, the resiliency. Yeah, well, as I say, it grows on degraded land with little input. It's a very hardy plant. Of course, it does better if it has water. Like any leafy plant, but it's called the never die tree in Africa. It means that even in a drought, it won't die. It might kind of tear back and look like a stick, but the minute there's water and nutrients, it'll blossom again. It's also called the famine tree. Any village that plants it will have something to eat that has very high nutritional value and medicinal value, a nutraceutical value. And it plays well with other species, unlike trees like eucalyptus, which became very fashionable for some charities and development agencies and kind of destroys everything around it. This is the ideal agroforestry tree. So, and again, the fact that it grows on degraded land and become a keystone species for these agroecology approaches means that I think it could be a keystone for regenerating an enormous amount of degraded land and providing all these benefits to communities, so they're motivated. I'll say that in the midst of this crisis, when a lot of charities are pulling out and a lot of communities are simply not doing the work anymore because they got used to being paid, we haven't done it on that basis. Our communities are planting more trees now and grafting more trees now than they were before the pandemic, which is now 60% unemployment in Kenya. It's an absolute tragedy. And yet these programs are persisting because we created a model of a regenerative society, and that I think is really the goal. I wanted to say just about the hardiness. This is where malnutrition and degraded land are most prevalent, and this is where moringa thrives.
Mark,
So
thank you so much for this. This was an amazing talk, and I'm afraid we're kind of running out of time, but I wanted to point out to everyone that Mark's email address and website are in the chat. So you want to copy that there to reach out to him.
All right.
Thank you. Sorry it was so information dense.
Well, Mark, it was fantastic. We loved all the information, and we're just sorry we don't have more time to pack it all in.
Yeah, and I'll also just say briefly, I mean, that's the essence of this, right? We know that it's dense. It's supposed to be dense because it's a beginning, not an end. And so it's a way to just introduce everybody. And Mark, it's always so great to see you. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, let me jump in now. It's my great pleasure, indeed my honor, to introduce Michael Anderson, another extraordinary person, using the turn of phrase that Patty used in introducing Mark. Michael lives his life at the intersection of MVP, mission, values, and purpose. He graduated from Harvard College with a degree in government, and get this, he then worked in algorithm development and trading, volatility trading, investment banking, asset management, and community empowerment as a hip-hop entrepreneur for 10 years. In 2019, he was named New Jersey's Black Tech Exec of the Year. Michael is president of Impact Solutions, and we've got his email and the website for Impact Solutions in the chat as well, which advises brokers, consults deals, and entertains the world's most impactful people, ventures, and movements. MPAC is working to democratize access to capital through the #1 platform in the world for Black entrepreneurs. They partner with public, private, and philanthropic institutions and leverage financial technology, real estate development, nonprofit programs to develop the next generation of majority entrepreneurs. An amazing aspirational mission. In speaking with Michael yesterday, I discovered just an amazing person, a person who knows what it's like not to know where your next meal will come from, and a person who's lived in luxury and traveled the world. But most importantly, he's a person who lives into being explicit, deliberate, and intentional. His worldview is multi-ethnic and multi-generational. And he's so beautifully aligned with the vision, mission, values, and potential of future capital, not only from a business perspective, but also, and perhaps most importantly, from a spiritual perspective. So it's really my pleasure, my great pleasure, and my honor to introduce Michael Anderson. So Michael, jump in, please.
Thank you so much. I'm so grateful for everyone listening all around the world. It's truly an honor to be here and be deliberately, intentionally, and focused on racial and social economic inclusion. I'm aware that many of you potentially do not necessarily understand the vantage point and perspective that I share here in Newark, New Jersey, which is the largest community in the state of New Jersey, but also a community in which those pillars of ESG aren't necessarily demonstrating any type of American dream. And in the aftermath of the 4th of July holiday, it's very prudent that we're here to discuss the future of capital and also conscious capitalism. And my ultimate aspiration is democratize access to this American dream, which at present seems to be disenfranchising so many Americans and all around the world. I know that these issues are not necessarily solely American issues, but the work that we are deliberately and intentionally focused on that I'll be outlining today starts with what we're doing domestically and also abroad for new majority entrepreneurs. And when I discuss new majority, I find that the word minority that, for instance, the federal government here in the States utilizes doesn't necessarily represent the value system of what it means to be a whole person. And yes, I'm an African American, but I fervently think that it's an injustice from a godly perspective and also from a social, political, and economic perspective if we don't see each other as whole beings And if we don't assess this $20 trillion domestic economy and $80 trillion global economy with the impact that would happen if we democratize access to capital and also contracts for underrepresented entrepreneurs. So as I was telling Steve yesterday, my nickname, I go by quadrillions sometimes, and I utilize that term because I have fervently done in the research that we partner with universities that there would be a quadrillion-dollar global economy, and the way that capital is not being allocated, this $70 trillion in institutional capital, as you may know, only 1.3% is managed by non-white men. Being able to then allocate on an institutional level, the ramifications and implications are a quadrillion-dollar increase in terms of global macro output over the course of several years. And the vehicle through which I am facilitating this change in democratizing access to capital and contracts is called Impact Solutions. Now, impact is because we're fervently committed to having an impact, but impact is also my initials, and I'm utilizing every ounce of me and every partner that we have, which is philanthropic, private and public sector, in order to utilize our financial technology intermediary to partner with institutions that then allocate contracts and capital, but also develop this pipeline and feed this pipeline of diverse entrepreneurs, which at present access a fraction of a percent of angel and venture capital. And then from an institutional and investment standpoint, effectively 0%. And to drill down on specific problems, I actually prepared a deck. I'm going to share this screen and hope this goes well. Can you guys see it? Let me know if y'all can see it.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Can't see my screen.
Not yet. Third time's a charm, though. Why don't you see if you could scroll down? There'll be like a toolbar. Do you see? Have you been clicking on the arrow, that green arrow that says share? Now, here we go.
There you go.
Now
Perfect, Michael.
Now you can see it. Okay, yeah. 1 second, right? Pardon me, 1 second. Apologize. So this right here is a bit. Can you guys see this?
Yes.
This is a bit about the Impact Institute, which is our nonprofit work that we're doing here in Newark, New Jersey. And the focus on the nonprofit angle is to democratize access to the entrepreneurship for the next generation. So we already have in place a 6-week curriculum and programs that we're running because I started my career when I was 15 years old as an activist in this community with the NACP, National Voter Fund Voter Empowerment Program, but I was also an entrepreneur. And when I look at myself now, decades later, having outperformed in many statistical indicators and metrics, I fervently believe that establishing a systemic way in which to inculcate this value system through weekly lessons to our young entrepreneurs is the next iteration of what it takes to make infinitely more, smarter, younger, faster, better Michael Andersons and beyond. So from a nonprofit standpoint, we've partnered with Dr. Caldwell, who's the executive director of FDU's Innovation Center for Entrepreneurship, to develop this Impact Institute program, which from the life cycle of an entrepreneur in economic development, we're focused on reaching the young people and giving them attainable paradigms. So again, in New Jersey, a fact that you probably don't know is that we lead the nation, unfortunately, in Black youth mass incarceration. And to drill down a little bit more, Black youth are incarcerated here 6 times more than the national average, and twice as much as the next worst state. So New Jersey, far and away from a wealth gap and incarceration, we are the epicenter of funneling youth from classrooms into prisons. And I found as a youth, my lane and my calling through entrepreneurship and activism, and the Impact Institute is one of those tangible nonprofit ways from which we are looking for support in order to inculcate a value system which ultimately engenders self-worth for our entrepreneurs through our reading list, but also helps them grasp a basic formation of the standard operating procedures that they will then need to create equity through entrepreneurship and creative entrepreneurship for their families. Again, a little bit more data, specifically in New Jersey, Black entrepreneurs typically have around 10% of the employees on payroll and typically earn around 10% of gross revenue, as do white-owned firms here. And obviously that has disastrous implications when we think about employment, underinvestment, and over-indexing of mass incarceration. So you guys with me, y'all understand what we're doing from a nonprofit perspective here with the Impact Institute. Hello? Y'all hear me? Okay.
Yep.
Yes.
We got a thumbs up over here. We're all mute so we can focus on you. Yeah.
A second. Now I'm going to go into the, pardon me, I gotta pull this up. And forgive me, I'm still figuring out the Zoom world. Now we're gonna go into the for-profit financial technology aspect of it. Pardon me, 1 second. Hold on 1 second. Okay. Can y'all see my screen?
Nope. Your screen share disappeared.
Can you see my screen now?
There we go.
Yes, we can.
Perfect.
Now we're in a for-profit world. Business development for all. Impact solutions impacting the world. Right?
Yep.
So again, that quadrillion is the economic shortfall and disparities in capital allocation limiting women and ethnic groups. And this data that we're also using is from the U.S. Census Survey of Business Owners. So when we discuss contracting, it's probably disheartening to understand that New York City and New Jersey, which are considered among the most diverse cities and states in the United States and in the world, the contracting, the amount of money that our state and local government is spending with businesses is less than 5% in New York City and less than 3% in the state of New Jersey, around of tens of billions of dollars to every business that is not owned by a white male. And again, we've discussed that 1% of $70 trillion in institutional capital, which is allocated to women and diverse managers. And if we think about public employees and the pension funds here in the state as well as nationwide, you're talking about trillions of dollars that gets invested in companies, but that underlying capital is not flowing to any assets that are focused on servicing the Black community and or reflect corporate diversity and or ownership from African Americans. So the solution, as you can see, the planet, ABCDE, advising, broker dealer, consulting, and entertainment. ABCDE, and moving that money around that way. From a technological standpoint, we've developed a marketplace network workflow tool that we're optimizing right now in partnership with public philanthropic and private groups that is focused on executing business development in the transfer and development of intellectual capital, financial capital, network capital, and utilizing social capital. So again, Steve kind of got to it when he mentioned hip hop, but I traveled the world as a hip hop artist and I work with some of the biggest names in the industry. And what I realized in the music world and in entertainment, you're transferring energy. And my hypothesis when I set out in my dorm room when I was at Harvard was, how about utilizing the mass appeal of the culture, which is billions of people that consume the content, but leveraging underlying assets in the securitization that happens in venture capital, private equity, and asset management with relevance to the culture which is currently being exploited. So again, if you think about hip hop, which is uniquely American, or was a uniquely American product, African Americans only earn around 10% of the wealth created by that art form, which had been up until recently pretty much synonymous with Black American culture. So from a business standpoint—
Hey, Michael, I just want you to be sure, we don't have a lot of time left. I want you to be sure to get to, maybe identifying a couple of acupressure points where we could help you kind of put pressure on the system.
Right.
In other words, what can we do to help?
Right. Definitely. Let me get to that.
Yeah.
Definitely. So my mantra is culture times capital is community change. C4 is our church. C4 is our platform and what we're about, right? So we have so many people in the culture that we're connected to, but culture is so siloed from capital, right? The culture and the influences that predominate America, youth, our culture in general, and especially hip hop is completely siloed from the institutional ways in which capital flows, which would then ameliorate some of these social ills that we're screaming about and that we're experiencing in our communities. So from an impact standpoint, what we are seeking help from mission-driven and aligned parties is enabling us to develop this one-stop shop platform from which the public, private, and philanthropic institutions can be deliberately and intentionally supplying capital for diverse movements, ventures, and people, and partnering with public sector, private sector, and philanthropic institutions to then invest in our communities and leverage these SOPs, which we've utilized to be successful, but scale it from just one-off helping venture by venture by venture into a 24/7 on-demand platform. So you see some of these names, and maybe this audience is a little bit familiar with the Alliance 17 initiative that UBS discussed in Europe. A couple of years ago, they announced that at Davos, they said they wanted to help underwrite a platform and an intermediary to move capital into social impact investments. I'm talking about leveraging a specific type of technology from which AngelList and some of these other names that you're familiar with, Uber, but specifically for putting capital into our communities and into our entrepreneurs, and where the pipeline and the culture of creative entrepreneurs, underserved entrepreneurs, Black, Indigenous entrepreneurs can collide with these institutions which have not found a way from which to invest directly and deploy into our companies, our investment vehicles, and our communities in a way to create equity. So in terms of what this looks like, this is just a little outline and a design of a site that we drafted up for the federal government and their Minority Business Development Administration about a year ago. I partnered with the Department of Commerce's MB office in Philadelphia, which is focused on minority business. And we developed a thorough strategy and a thorough technology to implement. However, our government has yet to really prioritize investing in minority business. And some would say that the current administration may not necessarily be the most friendly towards these types of partnerships. So just as you see our global tech partner, Republic, and our state political partner, the Black Caucus, and our regional partner, which is also a minority business center in Philadelphia, which is a leading minority business center for creating business development solutions for Black and Indigenous businesses in the Northeastern United States that came out of the Wharton School. We're looking for mission-aligned partners that want to support the technology that we're building, which is in a way industry agnostic and even asset class agnostic, but is wholly focused on creating equity in the next generation of entrepreneurs, the next generation of diverse, inclusive, wealthy, healthy, vibrant communities. And I appreciate y'all so much for understanding what we're building. Any questions, I'm available 24/7 on demand. And I hope this makes a little bit of sense, and that you've gotten some information that can help you understand the crisis that finance is exacerbating, but we collectively can ameliorate through culture and capital, changing our communities.
And Michael, you're inviting people to reach out to you directly. Is that correct? I just want to be clear about that.
Yes, sir.
And that would be via email, or is there a way on the website, for that connection?
Email, but if you want to come impact the world with us, you can call this number right here. It's the number's so easy that it might confuse you. 310-5325. You can call me anytime. You can email president@Impact Solutions at any time. You can reach out at Press Quadrillions on social media or on LinkedIn. But again, for this community, my phone's always here. My email's always here. And I'm so humbled and grateful to be able to help y'all understand how we're impacting the world. And I invite you to join us on this journey to make a more inclusive planet and cosmos.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
One other question. Is anybody else on the call? Just want to unmute and ask a quick question for Michael. Michael, you've blown us away.
Yes, I don't have a question, but really only, Michael, a comment. This is fantastic work you're involved in, and we're really grateful that you're here today.
Oh, I'm humbled. Thank you guys so much, and it's just a blessing to be able to speak candidly about these crises from which finance has ignored. And as we see, every corporation right now is publishing a hashtag Black Lives Matter, but these corporations and even public sector and philanthropic entities have invested so much into parties that have created a set of conditions. And I am seeing that, quite frankly, many African Americans and indigenous Americans have just settled on a permanency of being a minority, of being a second-class citizen. And I think that collectively we can create some type of equity through conscious, deliberate, intentional investing and having appropriate conversations about what economic inclusion looks like. So thank y'all so much for listening.
Hey, Michael, Lawrence Ford here. Welcome home. This is it, man. This is the place we have these conversations. This is the place that we, help support and fuel amazing people like you in the world that understand truly. I mean, at the root of all of this is this economic weaponization. And, we need to get to the core of that, all of us, because money controls everything. And it's been weaponized in names of all sorts of atrocities. So listen, I want to also just mention the segue before we go to Carol, that part of this is that we are, as Future Capital, for any of you who want to move towards a formal working group within our organization, we can talk. We won't have a lot of time to talk about this. Steve, I'm going to have you mention a couple things at the close of the call on how people can contact us regarding that. But I want to put that out there. It's one thing to get your email. That's great. It's another thing is we are embracing you as part of the family. Mark and Michael, and of course, Carol, and all the rest of you who are coming here to help support you in any way possible. And I'll have Steve, you'll maybe say a word of that at the end of the call, if that's okay.
Could I just also say, Michael, I really appreciate all that you're doing. I grew up in northern New Jersey in Westwood in the 60s and 70s, and I saw many of the problems there, and I'm really happy that you're working there. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank y'all. I appreciate you.
Thanks, Michael. There'll be a lot more, I'm sure. All right, so let's chat about Carol. So Carol Carter. So, I've been sitting here kind of rattling in my brain. I've known Carol for a long time. And I'm like, how the hell do you introduce somebody like Carol? So let me give it a best shot. So there are people who dream. There are people who do. And then there's Carol Carter. And that's like you add in a whole bunch of heart and love and massive action and someone who's been busting through glass ceilings her entire life. That's Carol. And I'm going to read a little bit formal because it's important for all of you to know what she's done in particular. So I will actually read something here, but I want to start with a little story that will give you a feeling about Carol Carter. She does this thing which you're about to hear about is called Global Minded, which is this amazing work that happens and this huge, huge conference that goes on. So I don't know, Carol, if it was like, this is a few years ago, I was speaking at Global Minded and I was in my car down by the beach and Carol, I think it was like the night before or 2 days before or something insane like that. And Carol has the time to speak to me for like half an hour, one-on-one about, how am I going to get there and what's going to happen, what's going to look like. I'm like, Carol, how are you able to do this? And of course, she blamed it on her wonderful team, which is true, but we also know it's a lot more than that. So that's Carol Carter, full of action, heart, and love. And I'm going to be a little more formal now. She's the national and international student success author, speaker, and entrepreneur. She began her career in publishing at Prentice Hall and became the first female assistant VP and director of college marketing at age 26. First glass ceiling. Later, As VP and publisher, she developed the widely acclaimed Keys to Success series to help college students connect their academic success to their future success. I also want to say that she also, in her second glass ceiling, really busted through as well, and we'll talk more about that as we go back and forth. Now in the eighth edition, the series is available in multiple languages, has been used by more than, get this one, 3 million students worldwide. In addition to the Keys series, Carol has also authored multiple other academic success books for middle, high school, and college level students. Her experience in international work to help shape her unique perspective on how institutions of learning, youth development, and business can prepare students from all backgrounds and levels of learning to thrive in an increasingly complex world. In 2014, and by the way, this is her biggest of all glass ceilings she's busting through, and we're going to talk about this today, is her nonprofit venture, Global Minded. And it's to bring together leaders in education, government, business, and social enterprise committed to improving access and equity to education, employment, and health. Now it's in its 6th year. The annual conference attracts more than 1,000 attendees, including 100 first-generation college students who learn academic and professional skills while networking with companies who seek diverse talent and pipeline. I had to read that whole thing because she's an amazing person and I didn't want to miss anything. Hello, Carol.
Hello, Lawrence, and so great to be with you all today. Thank you for having me. And loved listening to Mark and Michael because it's so related to the work that we do. So thanks to both of you as well in your work.
And Carol, let's start with a little bit about, very briefly, a couple of your story with your glass ceilings, and let's roll right into our relationship with Future Capital and Global Minded and the work you're doing, and let everybody know in this short period of time, how we can collaborate and continue to support you.
Sure. Well, I'll just share very briefly just my personal story, that when I was in 5th grade, my family lost all of our money. And so I knew at that time that I really had to rely on myself. So I've always related to the underdog and the outlier. And I'm also the last trailer child of World War II parents. I have 4 brothers and 5 male cousins. So I've always been the outlier in my family as the woman. And I said that was great training for corporate America. But I've always really had, since a very young age, so much compassion for every person from every culture, every background. And what I realized when I started college is that my brothers and their lessons were the hidden curriculum that I needed to get promoted at age 26. I went to a state school. I never got a master's degree. But what I learned and what I saw in those brothers and their experiences was so much to me. So think of Global Minded as the networks, the role models, the mentors, the internships for students who are from the zip codes. Like when I used to be a sales rep at age 21 in Newark and calling on, Rutgers, Newark. I very much know what Michael's talking about. And I called on Lehman College and all kinds of other neighborhoods where students from those neighborhoods do not have the connection. So even if they beat the odds, they're Pell eligible, they get into college, only 11% pre-pandemic are graduating from college. So this is quite a huge issue of why we don't have more diversity in corporate America or on boards or in the C-suite, is we're not graduating it out of our high schools and our colleges. So that's really the major thing that Global Minded is solving for. And we know, as Michael does, that when those students are given even one role model as a connection where they can see a person of color in somebody who's out working at KPMG or some other kind of company, they can see that in themselves. But often at our, I'll just say predominantly white institutions that are out there, a lot of our most amazing diverse students don't even see themselves in their own college faculty if they make it to college. So that's really what Global Minded is solving for. And we do that in a number of different ways. We have the annual conferences Lawrence shared. We have inclusive leader awards across 14 sectors. We feel strongly that until the diversity and inclusion role models are as well known as the sports stars and the movie stars, we're not going to have that kind of diversity because nobody knows who those role models are. So that is another really key part of our work. And then we work with 15 historically Black colleges, Hispanic serving institutions, and minority serving institutions, which is why, Mark, I asked you the question. We work with some of those land grant HBCUs where there might be some good Venn diagram collaboration there. So we know that those students are the least resourced, those faculty are the least resourced, and we want foundations and funders to underwrite training, materials, the hidden curriculum that those students need to be able to not only graduate, but we want them to get into promotion pathway jobs so they become a Michael, who is somebody who can really earn at that wealth level and then be able to open doors for others with that wealth, as well as, you know, their generous leadership in other capacities. But we know that for most of our students who beat the odds to graduate, who are diverse, are low-income students, that's not happening for them. They're not getting into the promotion pathway jobs. They're not getting promoted when they're 26 or they're 30. And that is where we see the real opportunity to close the equity gap, especially right now in our country where we really have two pandemics in the US and in the world. One is COVID, one is the racial inequities that have gone on since in the US, you know, 1619, and in other countries like Colombia and Brazil and other places for almost as long. For some of the many same reasons. So we see all of those different connections and we realize that it's going to really take a systemic strategy to really deal with systemic issues that have gotten us here. It's not just police brutality. It's not just educational inequity. It's not just that, as Michael talked about, the capital is not flowing to these groups that really need to scale to be able to really turn around these generations of patterns. It is systemic and you need to have a strategy for each of those different areas. So that's what we're focused on.
So Carol, yeah, let's drill down a little bit more on those systemic strategies at Global Minded. Tell me, you know, some of the real things that are you know, taking way, and then we're going to circle around a little bit to some of the challenges and busting through the ceiling with your work. But let's drill in a little detail so everybody can understand the real roll up your sleeves work you're doing.
You bet. So one of the big things we do is we provide for the first generation of college student leaders leadership training program that we can then connect them to internships and role models and the jobs that their colleges don't necessarily have the bandwidth or even know their needs at the level that they could to make those connections. And we're really delighted. Crystal Rose is on here. She's my colleague of a few years from Aussie Media, to work with Aussie and a couple of other partners on what we call reimagining this hidden curriculum. Because right now, as probably most students are going to be distributed in the fall, and many of our students we serve are most disproportionately affected by these two pandemics, because we know that many of them have lost family members, many of them have been COVID impacted, and then the racial inequities are hitting all of them just as much. And we also know from LinkedIn and the economic graph that right now men are being hired, but women and people of color are not being hired right now as the economy is self-correcting. So we're looking at all of those different factors. But what we want to do is really build out a media platform for this hidden curriculum so that we can get foundations and funders to make this fee waived to these different colleges, the historically Black colleges, the minority serving institutions, state colleges that have really been hard hit, but for whom, you know, many of these students are being served, and then many of our community college partners. So we are looking at the ways in which what we've done in the past can be really transformed and scale through technology with the role models of the diverse people like Michael and so many in our community. We're about 65% diverse. That's on our advisory councils, on our board, our speakers. You come to our conference and the head of the KPMG Foundation came last year and he said, in his 40 years going to different higher ed conferences, he had never seen one as effective as what we had knit together, because everybody was at the table and everybody was equal. The college presidents were equal, the business owners were equal to these first-gen students, and they were at tables with them, problem solving and making those connections, because those are those future leaders that can lead those companies someday. So that's, you know, looking at how we can go from 15 schools to 70 schools to 200 schools and really share those best practices. That's what Crystal and I and kind of our little team want to be able to really build out and scale and get funding for. And then the other piece is we have something called the Bold Goal. And we had said by 2025, we wanted to have 25 million first-gen students, first-gen graduates, those who work with them and those who want to hire them, algorithmically connected for role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. So we know that if there's any eHarmony making matches for people to get married to each other, we sure in the world should be doing that for people on jobs and connections so that they can connect to role models and mentors and jobs that would be a great fit for them. So that we know with COVID, we can't wait till 2025. We have to actually accomplish that in the next couple of years. So that is our bigger picture of where we want to go. And we know that there's last year, 10 million Pell eligible students who started college in the fall. And before COVID, only 1 million of them were projected to finish college in 4 to 6 years. So we know we've really got to shore up these different gaps because that is our diverse talent pipeline. And everybody under 15 is diverse. And so we really know that working with many of you who are our allies on a call like this, you will be the people that can really help us to make those big moonshots in our world happen for these students who otherwise would not be at the table, would not have the voice, would not be given the onboarding and be able to come as successful as Michael or Crystal or any of the other amazing people that we work with. So,
Carol, before we open it up to questions, I want to ask you about this fourth glass ceiling that you're hammering on with everything you've got. And I think it's a really important story to share a little bit with everybody because, you know, one of the, you know, during the absolute sadness and misery around this pandemic, you know, as I mentioned at the beginning of the call, you know, there's never been a meaningful transformation, whether it's individually or globally, that's pretty. So the beauty of this is that it's exposing a lot of the cracks and fissures that we've had that have existed just below the surface for so long to be healed internally and organizationally, which we've all spoke of. One of which, of course, is this consolidated power of capital, which continues to express itself in abuse in many different ways. And when you're telling me your story about the fourth glass ceiling, I'm like, holy crap, how come, you know, an amazing woman like you with all of your corporate experience and success, you know, still having challenges raising, you know, capital, right? I mean, quite frankly. Yes?
Yeah. Yes, I think, you know, just so you all know too, I started after 17 years doing corporate, I started my own company called Lifebound. I self-funded it with those book royalties. And then I self-funded Global Minded, not even realizing how hard it is for women and people of color to get the access to capital. And I also didn't realize that only 1% of women have businesses that do more than $1 million. So I was so lucky that myself and my 3 co-authors were all able to beat those odds, and that I could funnel that into this that I care about the most, which is really closing the equity gap. But I think there's a real equity story we have here. If somebody with my background considers this glass ceiling of the equity to be harder than the other 3 put together, we really need to look at the reality of how hard it is for people who even come with networks. And I don't have an MBA or a master's degree, but I have a lot of other networks. And to realize how hard it is to get traction, even with those backgrounds, that means that people with half the background that I have, people who are other women who were in Newark, people who are in Baltimore, you know, inner city, what is it really like for them? And I think we have to really start truth telling about these kinds of things. We're fortunate right now. We're working with Dr. Nita Mosby Tyler and the Equity Project and something called Every Learner Everywhere as a sub-grantee for Bill and Melinda Gates to interview our 100 students right now. And I think we need to start interviewing a lot more people who are on the ground, who can share with people like all of us who really have been able to get to a place of privilege where you can really think about what to do for others because you're at a certain place. And I think the more we have that knowledge, the more we can be conscious, Lawrence, as you point out, of where the needs are and how we can financially support those needs so that the money is really flowing to the people who are moving the major levers of access and equity at the highest level.
Excellent. Thanks, Carol. Listen, we've got about 3 minutes left or so, so I want to open it up to questions, and I think it'll be much better done, you know, just unmute yourself and jump in. We're a small enough group here where I think we can all do this. So just jump right in and talk to Carol. Go ahead, Michael. I see you unmuting first.
Oh, Carol, I messaged you this privately. Had you heard of the LEAD program?
No, but I wrote down your cell phone, and Michael, I am calling you. I already wrote Bernie Milano from the KPMG Foundation. I'm like, do you know him? And he's like, I don't. And I'm like, I'm introducing you guys.
Oh, so no, that's amazing. Yeah. I was just bringing up LEAD because when I was a rising senior in high school, I went to the LEAD program in business, and this was at the Wharton School of Business and a bunch of other undergraduate business schools. And they exposed us to what careers in business would look like. And even my best friend from that program is one of my partners, one of my best friends in the world today. But I would love to even see how we can partner and support developing that pipeline as early as possible. Because even for me, that network that you spoke about in terms of being able to make certain moves had been established and the formations existed in high school. And I do think the earlier that we get at developing the pipeline, the more successful we'll ultimately be in terms of C-suite diversity and making changes at that highest level and breaking these glass ceilings.
100%. I'm so excited to understand everything about what you're doing. So absolutely.
Okay, anybody else want to jump in? We got a few minutes left. Just jump right in.
No, you can't see me.
We can see you.
There we go. We can see you. Yes.
Okay, my name is Dr. Karambu Ringera. I'm watching you all from Kenya. This is one of the most amazing talks that I have had, and I don't know who to contact because all of you have been amazing. But I hope one day, Lawrence, that I'll speak at this forum because Marc's project, the Regen Culture program that we are developing in Meru County in Kenya. Thank you all for this amazing.
Hey, Karambu.
Thank you. Thank
you. Karambu.
Yeah.
This is Patty. So I'm so glad you joined the call. I'm so glad you joined the call. We'll talk offline about getting you on here, okay?
Yeah.
Perfect. Sounds good. Thank you for joining.
Thank you.
And I just was going to share too that 7 years ago, I had the great honor to speak at the Africa International School Association conference to 850 of the educators from around Africa in Nairobi. And it was, you know, the day after Wangari Maathai's funeral. And so really special time being there. So
I knew Wangari in the 90s, and she got into all of this. So
amazing. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carol. And thank you for everybody else today. And I still want to bring everybody back to that vision of what we're doing here at Future Capital, which is basically just hold in your mind this safe space of garden where our job, who, you know, Steve, Patty, myself, and some other members with Heather, you know, really make sure that the soil is fertile and make sure that we have an open, authentic space where those of us who resonate with this around this nexus between consciousness and capital can come together and support each other. And that's going to either be, you know, individual work we do or bilateral, like we've already seen, you know, start to take off today, or maybe something collective. And in that collective space is where we get to working groups. And I'm going to have Steve talk about that for a second, but Again, thank you for all of the people today sharing and the beautiful work you do to make the world a better place around this nexus. Last week, I also want to mention we had Richard Barrett, Amelia Barlow, and Michael Gelb, who are also doing amazing work, who are maybe moving into formal working groups with us. And Steve, I'm going to hand it over to you before we start to wrap this up, and just maybe give a couple words about where people could get in touch with us and what they need to do regarding if they want to move this into considering the next level of being a working group here at Future Capital.
So thank you, Lawrence, and thank you all for joining us today. Special thanks to the amazing speakers that we've had today. A minute ago, I posted in the chat an invitation, or basically a way to contact us. It's info@futureofcapital.org. That email would go to Lawrence, to Heather, to Patty, and myself, and we'll get back to you with, well, with an appropriate response as to whatever it is you might want to talk to us about. But a couple of things that might be topics of conversation. One, perhaps, would be, hey, I'd like to speak at one of these, future capital conversations. So there's some information that we need, but anyway, we'll take care of that offline. We don't need to deal with that right this minute, but send that request to info@futureofcapital.org. Separately, and in alignment with what Lawrence was just saying about working groups, we do have 3 that are currently operating at relatively high levels of functionality. One is focused on consciousness, one is focused on capital, and one is focused on creating a Future Capital Fellowship program, which would perhaps not quite gelled yet, but maybe a way to train future leaders like those of you on this call, to go out and change the world, and to change it in all the ways that we've been talking about today. There's also a couple of conversations about other potential working groups. Amelia, for example, Amelia Barlow, who presented on the call last week, is talking with us about perhaps bringing her work, under the Future Capital tent, if you will, as potentially a more formal working group. And there's a couple of others like that. And so if there's anything you're doing or anything that you're involved with that you feel really fits the values, the mission, the vision, the potential of Future Capital, the connecting capital and consciousness and creating a new world out of that, the nexus of the power of that nexus, we would welcome that conversation. So maybe that's enough for now, because we are now running out of time pretty fast.
That's perfect, Steve. Thank you. And also just a reminder for everyone, if you want to present in upcoming months, we have a pipeline of people who are building on that, and still just email to info@futureofcapital.org and we'll consider you, or if you know other people. So please feel free. Anybody have anything? This is pretty cool because we've got 3 extra minutes, and usually, in these things you're like hustling and you're a minute late and it's like, oh my God, we got to close it out. But I see so many beautiful, wonderful faces here I haven't seen, and names in so long. I'd love to chat with everybody individually, but does anybody feel inspired to say something? Because we've got some extra time, so there must be a reason for that.
Yeah, this is Carol. Just wanted to say that I've been out of circulation for a while, but I'm now up, and if anyone's looking for me, please give me a second chance.
Oh, Carol, you've got 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th. You got all the chances in the world with us, boy. So good to see you face.
So great to see you, Carol. I'm glad you joined.
Nice to see you too, Carol.
Rodolfo, I'm going to call you out because I always love to see your smiling face. You don't have to say anything official. You can just say hi, but tell me how are you and what's going on that side of the world?
Well, I am in Milano right now, and in Milano, the situation is under control, luckily, but we have to be careful, just to think about other people, because our actions immediately reflects to, the status of other people. And unfortunately, there are a few that are unable to understand this simple concept, and they put at risk anybody else. And that's true everywhere. And I think that we have to emphasize this component that it's a matter of education. If you really like to respect others, you have first of all to think about others by your actions, and then so wearing your masks and you know the kind of simple things. But I am really amazed because many people don't even understand this level of simplicity.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah. Thank you, Rodolfo. Sometimes it's the small things that are the big things, and it's our actions. I appreciate that. It's a great way to wrap this up. Thank you so much, and it's always good to hear your voice. Thank you for letting me just call on you.
Thank you.
Heather, why don't you wrap us up with what's coming next and close us all out? And again, thank you for everybody showing up. It's so great to see everybody.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for joining. I have the biggest smile that I'm going to carry with me for the remainder of the day, that you took your time out of the day, precious time, to join us. Keep your eyes open for further communication. But if you can mark your calendars, these meetings happen on the second Wednesday of every month. So we'll communicate that moving forward. The replay will be available, and we'll get that information to you as soon as it becomes available on our YouTube channel, where there you could watch the last show as well. But what I'd like to do, end the call, is going into a moment of silence. Feel free to drop off when necessary. I'd like to ask that you keep special thoughts and prayers in your hearts for those that don't have a voice tonight, those that are suffering, and those that feel alone. And in addition, I'd like to spend special prayers to Michael Anderson's daughter, Gracie Lynn Trinity Michelle, who is going to be having a medical procedure today. So if you can hold her in your thoughts and prayers, we would all appreciate it. And everyone, I love you. Have an amazing day. And we'll go into a moment of silence. You drop off when you need to. Mwah.
Thanks, Heather.
I love you all.
I love you. Mwah.